For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, that one is like a person who looks intently at their natural face in a mirror. For that person looks at themselves and goes away and at once forgets what they were like. Our modern reading is from Native American musician, philosopher, and recipient of the National Medal of Freedom, High Eagle. The mere possession of a vision is not the same as living it, nor can we encourage others with it if we do not ourselves understand and follow its truths. The pattern of the Great Spirit is over us all, but if we follow our own spirits from within, our pattern becomes clearer. For centuries, others have sought their visions. They prepare themselves so that if the Creator desires them to know their life's purpose, then the vision would be revealed. To be blessed with visions is not enough. We must live it.
That was so beautiful. So beautiful. So several years ago, I was serving our Unitarian Universalist congregation up in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, where I found myself one morning in the kitchen with a very long-time member of the congregation, Porter Dickinson. I was a lot younger then, and I felt a great respect for Porter's age-tested wisdom. He was in his early 70s, and I in my early 40s. Now that I'm nearing my mid-60s mark myself, 70 doesn't seem quite so daunting or monumental. But I'd still like Porter just the same. He was a retired businessman, had a strong local accent, and was a New England Yankee through and through. He was quite sharp in his appearance and quick and sharp in his wit. He had a great sense of humor, a little bit of a temper, and was very knowledgeable about all kinds of things, but particularly about real estate and money. I held Porter in high esteem, and I would have respected his wisdom, no matter how much older or younger than he would have been. Anyway, there we were in the kitchen of First Parish Church, talking about an urgent repair project on the 170-year-old building. It was a project that had needed some serious attention for a while, but little to no progress had been made on it by our facilities committee or its chair. Porter was expressing a bit of frustration and impatience. I said that our facilities chair had recognized the problem and intended to address it, but that he just hadn't quite gotten around to accomplishing that yet. Porter commented on how long his response was in the coming, and he also mentioned how alarmingly typical he found that to be of our facilities chair. He meant to have it done by now, I said to Porter. I guess we'll just have to be more patient. I looked at him and I said, he means well, Porter. He means well. Porter instantly turned red in the face. He was a very easy read when he got excited, which wasn't overly rare. There must have been a good dose of Irish in his WASP lineage. Obviously, I gathered quickly I had touched upon a trigger. I want to tell you something that my mother once said to me, Charlie. His nose was about 12 inches from the tip of my own. A long time ago, my mother told me that the very worst thing that anyone could possibly say about another human being is that they mean well. If you say that someone means well, you're saying that they're unreliable and that their word is useless. And then he went on to say a few other rather choice and derogatory things about those who mean well. Porter wasn't taking me to task for slandering our facilities chair. Instead, he was insisting that I recognize the fuller implications of what it means when someone is supposedly well-intended when all they have to show for their good intention is that intention itself. Intentions without actions to back them up are useless, he assured me. If you say someone means well, you might as well just say that you've given up on them. Porter's judgment was a bit harsh. I suspect, though, that he was expressing a standard to which he held himself accountable. I also imagine that his exhortation was similar to what many of us here might have grown up with in our homes. I sure did. In my house, it was the adage, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I see heads shaking. I suspect that rang in some of your ears from time to time as well. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. intentions. It's difficult to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, as well it ought to be. There are just too many things that we can't know about someone else's life, about someone else's situation. It's pretty rare when what we know is sufficient to make us expert enough to cast judgment on others. You may be familiar with some good adages about that rule too. The point is, though, that leaving the judgment of others aside, we might each do well to discern for ourselves the difference between what we mean to do and what we actually do, or on a larger scale, what we mean to do with our lives and what we actually do with them. What is it that we believe we are here on earth, breathing and walking and talking, to do? What is it that you believe you're here to do? I know that many of us are fond of saying, and I hear this from many of you often, I know that many of us are fond of saying that there is no grand purpose in life. I think for some of us, such an admission would be paramount to conceding the existence of a superpower, God the Father type figure. I'm not altogether sure those two concepts need to be in any way attached or reliant on one another. But still, I don't know, maybe it is true that there is no grand purpose to life, which the universe holds in store for us individually. I don't know. We can, and I'm sure we do, each have our own thoughts and beliefs on that subject. I have to confess, though, to being rather skeptical when anyone starts claiming ultimate knowledge about such things. Even still, I suspect that whatever grand purpose might or might not exist, whether we do or do not admit it to ourselves or to others, there is still purpose. And it is at least the purpose which each of us ascribes to our own lives. We are capable of finding and making meaning in our lives, and so we do. To anyone who might be agnostic on that point, I would quote 19th century Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "A person will worship something. Have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and our character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming." The underlying assumption and message here is that we will worship what we value, and that which we worship is what gives our life direction, what gives our life purpose. Another of my ministerial colleagues, a theologian in her own right, recently retired, Judith Walker Riggs, also responded to anyone who might be agnostic regarding the admission of faith or belief. Judith wrote, "If we want to know what we believe, we need only to look at what we do. What we believe can always be discerned from what we do." So if the road to hell is paved with good intentions, if meaning well is the worst thing that we might possibly say about another person, if we will have our gods which we worship and in whom we place our faith, how can we best align what we mean to do, what we say we want to do, with what it is that we are actually doing? One of the things that is often said about Unitarian Universalism, even by many Unitarian Universalists, is that ours is a faith community where everyone can believe exactly what they want. And I would say that nothing could be further from the truth. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe what we must. That's not because anyone else is telling us what's true and what we must believe. It's because our own lives are telling us what's true. It is our lives that tell us what we must believe. We need only look at what we do to determine what we believe. If we were free to believe whatever we wanted, that would be a pretty easy path to follow. If we were free in our heart of hearts to believe what someone else insisted was the truth, then that might be a fairly easy path to follow as well. But our freedom of conscience keeps us from being at liberty to embrace as true that which we find to be less than true or untrue. For our religious and spiritual integrity to be intact, we are obliged to believe that which we discover to be true through our experience, through our intellect and our reason, through our intuition and through whatever fountains we have found to be our sources of truth. We cannot deny the truth that we happen upon, however unconventional it might be, however uncomfortable it might make us in the choices and in the actions that our truths compel us towards. Flannery O'Connor once quipped, "Know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd." So if we aren't finding truths that make us uncomfortable, that fail to make us odd, perhaps it's because we have stuck our heads in the sands of convention. Perhaps it's because we haven't been looking very hard for those truths. We are not only urged by life to own the truths that we come upon, but to be doggedly engaged in the search for them. There's another element in all of this that we might do well to consider at this point. Going back to my story from Fitchburg, there is the character that was the object of Porter Dickinson's frustration. Someone that we might call Mr. Doolittle. The question is, would Mr. Doolittle have recognized himself by that name? Or might he have more willingly responded to a label like Mr. Churchman? After all, he was the one who had taken on the responsibility of leadership in making sure that those ancient facilities were maintained as well as they possibly could be. It was, in truth, a huge responsibility. So we have Mr. Doolittle, aka Mr. Churchman, involved in two very different narratives. In one, he is a noble servant of the community who carries with him the onus of overseeing the property that the entire community depends upon. And he takes this task seriously but cautiously. He does not want to act in ways that are rash, which might jeopardize the very object of his responsibility. In the other narrative, he is one who means well but fails to act in ways that fulfill the responsibilities he has aspired to undertake. All the while, through his deliberations, or perhaps it's through his procrastinations, the situation in need of his response continues to grow more severe. No matter his intentions, if he fails to act in ways that remedy the situation, the whole place can come tumbling down around him and around everyone else. So again we ask, how can we best align what we say we want to do with what we're actually doing? Neither Mr. Doolittle nor Mr. Churchman would hardly recognize themselves in the other one. But I think that is exactly our task, to recognize ourselves in the other. If we're going to make good on our intentions, we need to recognize ourselves beyond the comfortable mythologies and narratives that tell us we are doing everything that we need to do, and that the narratives that tell us that the narratives that fail to challenge us, that fail to encourage us to be doers of the word and not just speakers of it. Because the mere possession of a vision is not the same thing as living it. We might all nod our heads and say, well, of course. But understanding and living it are very different. It's hard to live it. An example of what I'm talking about will, I hope, lead you to a recognition of where these dynamics might come into your own life and into your own narrative. And I use this as an illustration, but it's one that a number of people in this room might be involved in. Many of you are aware that here in Montclair there are some amount of considerable contention over issues in our school system in town. We don't need to go into the details of these issues. Perhaps it's enough to say that there are disagreements in the processes, past, present, and future, between various participants in the system, primarily the administration, including the school board, as well as teachers and parents. I've been involved in no fewer than 3 public conversations about these matters this past week. There have been a few private conversations as well. So I've had a number of opportunities to talk with individuals representing the various perspectives at play. From what I believe to be my objective and outside perspective, I can report to you 3 conclusions that I've found. First, that everyone engaged in these discussions, everyone, wants the school system to provide the very best educational opportunities possible for every child in Montclair schools. Second, that everyone engaged recognizes the need for public discourse in order to adequately air all the points of view. And third, almost everyone involved is totally assured of the correctness of their own perspective, and so refuses to hear what the other side is saying. Almost everyone. The folks in this local narrative tend to view themselves as the champions of education, bearing the responsibility for getting things fixed right. Most of them think, I believe, that their viewpoint is the only one that can possibly work. In the meantime, nothing is being done to repair the ailing institution. Everyone means well, but nothing is being accomplished. Judgments about others, some very harsh judgments, are flying about freely. It sounds a bit like things up in Fitchburg a few years back. It sounds a lot like what we hear coming out of Washington, D.C. quite regularly. It sounds a lot like too much public and even private discourse that can be heard just about anywhere far too often these days. It's not enough to mean well in regard to our relations with others. If we are going to do well with others and by others, we have to do the hard work of personal change and transformation, the hard work of giving and taking. In order for our intentions to become our actions, we have to learn that being right has nothing to do with loving our neighbors as ourselves. Being right most often has little to do with accomplishing much of value for the greater good. I have faith that these issues regarding the schools of Montclair will be resolved because self-righteousness will give way to the greater good, and people will act in ways that serve our children. Though more guardedly, I have the same hope for our officials in Washington, D.C. For those of us here, though, in your private lives and in your private doings, or even your public lives and public doings, I have the strongest faith of all, that you will want the larger good so badly that you will do whatever is in your power to do, whatever is in your strength to do, in order to make it so. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Who you are speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you're saying." So then may we listen very carefully to our lives and to one another. May we act caringly and decisively on the truths that we find and that we learn through our listening. May it be so. Let's join together in singing our closing hymn. When the Spirit says do. wrote, "In a world where there is so much to be done, I felt strongly impressed that there must be something for me to do. Indeed, there is something for each of us to do." Let us sing our response. Be with us now and in our days to come. As we extinguish our chalice, this worship comes to an end and our service begins. Blessed be and bless you. Amen.